only thing we have to fear is
in war.
fear itself.
There is no substitute for victory.
Let us never negotiate out of fear.
We stand undivided, forever united, fighting hand in hand for the liberty we burn, for glory and honor, for our sons and daughters, ever mindful of the lessons we've learned. Let the torch of freedom burn.
Welcome to the intersection of faith and politics. This is WallBuilders Live. Thanks for joining us today. Visit online at wallbuilders.com and wallbuilderslive.com. I'm Rick Green here with David Barton. It's Good News Friday, and especially this week, great election results on Tuesday. Yesterday, David, we dove into some of this and kind of looked at, in general, just the positive results, not even just a Republican-Democrat thing, just a lot of good conservatives that ran and won. So we've got some good positive change headed our way as a result of that. But as you mentioned yesterday, our work is not yet done. We pick up, the day after the election and start working on the next election. And also, you talked a little bit yesterday about some of the process and the leadership races that will take place in Washington, D.C., and how people can make calls on that even now. So there's still a lot to do, but there's a lot of good news to celebrate today.
Yeah, there's a lot of good news to celebrate. And, part of the reason is that in this election, there was a very high turnout of Bible-believing evangelical folks. They actually overperformed about 10% higher than what they normally do in these elections. So that body turned out. Now, it's interesting that one of the things that we do through here at WallBuilders is called the National Black Robe Regiment. And National Black Robe Regiment, we were on the ground in 8 separate states. These were states that we thought were very important for pro-family values and for traditional values, for constitutional conservatives, because our mantra here at WallBuilders is related to restoring and promoting our religious, our moral, and our constitutional heritage. And so part of the way we do that is informing churches on what they can do in the civil arena and not cross the line. And so putting out voters' guides, nonpartisan voters' guides. You simply put out a voters' guide that says, here's your candidates, here's what they believe on these big issues. Just choose who you want to vote for. Well, if you happen to be a biblical voter, you're going to look and say, well, I want people that will protect traditional family, that will protect life, that will protect these various things. And so we put out voters' guides. In 8 key states where we had key races, we literally put out over 3.5 million voters' guides in this election. We individually touched over 20,000 churches in this election. And it clearly appears to have made a difference. I mean, there is a big jump in the number of evangelicals, is what they call them in polling, but that's just dedicated Christian folks of a conservative bent who showed up in this election. So a lot of what we see in this election is attributable to people of faith taking a stand and taking action. And we talked just about the high caliber of candidates. Literally, I think this may be the best overall group of freshmen that I've seen since back in 1994 with the Republican Revolution, where we had so many strong conservative evangelical Bible-believing. Evangelical, in my mind, includes Bible-believing folk, Catholic, Protestant. It's not the stereotypical evangelical, but it's the sense of people who are really dedicated to the Scriptures and to God's principles. I mean, this is the best class in a long time, and that a lot of it goes back to the church being turned out. Certainly National Black Robe Regiment did a lot. Family Research Council was very active as well. The American Renewal Project. There were a lot of groups that were on the ground, and we saw the consequences of that on Tuesday night and the caliber of people that we got elected across the nation to the House. And certainly not everyone is like that, but the overwhelming majority of those we sent on Tuesday night certainly fit within the comfort zone for most Bible-believing, conservative, constitutional-thinking Christians.
Yeah, it's good. It's fantastic news. It's a great way to start today. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll dive into some of those details, talk about some of those folks that got elected, and talk about what you can continue to do to influence the culture. Stay with us right here on WallBuilders Live.
This is David Barton with another moment from America's history. Today, we heard that our founding fathers were largely atheists, agnostics, or deists. The writings of founding father Richard Henry Lee strongly refute that assertion. Richard Henry Lee was a signer of the Declaration of Independence, and he is specifically the man who made the motion in Congress that America separate from Great Britain. Following his death, his papers and correspondence, including numerous original handwritten letters from other prominent founding fathers, were passed on to his grandson. After having studied those letters, this was how the grandson described our founding fathers. He declared, "The wise and great men of those days were not ashamed publicly to confess the name of our blessed Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. In behalf of the people, as their representatives and rulers, they acknowledged the sublime doctrine of His mediation."
For more information on God's hand in American history, contact WallBuilders at 1-800-8-REBUILD.
Let the torch of freedom burn.
Welcome back. Thanks for staying with us here on WallBuilders Live. We were talking about the election results this week. Republicans take over the U.S. Senate, increase their majority in the House. Many of the members sent to Washington, D.C., and frankly, some of the governors that won re-election, some of the new ones, just good folks out there, as David was saying, that have good values, and it's because people of values showed up. More churches involved, more pastors talking about these issues, more people of faith spreading out those voter guides you were talking about, David. I mean, just across the board, there was more involvement from the faith community.
Yeah, there's more involvement. Now, there's some real challenges coming as a result because, the media spun this thing as, well, this is a rejection of Obama. As Obama said, I'm on the ballot. Well, if he's on the ballot, he did not fare well, and he's the one who said he's on the ballot. What was interesting is on Tuesday night, while elections were still coming in, the elections had barely made it to the Mountain Time Zone, when by that time the Republicans already had gained a majority in the Senate. They were going to control the Senate. And the White House announced that the president is not backing down of anything. As a matter of fact, he's moving forward faster. And by Christmas, he said he will, by executive order, announce amnesty for the entire, all the illegals in the United States. So he's moving forward very aggressively. I told folks on TV that night as we were covering it, if I were in his shoes and had his worldview, I would have a cabinet meeting on Wednesday morning and say, okay, all you cabinet guys, you start writing regulations and rules that move our agenda forward faster than any we've ever had. I want more regulations, more rules, because the way that federal law works right now, those regulations become federal law. They're not voted on by anybody in the House or Senate, but they become federal law. So if I were in his shoes and wanted to move that agenda forward, I would tell them to start writing regs like crazy. Write them out of the EPA, write them out of transportation, write them out of ag, write them out of everything, and let's get our agenda moving through. I would also tell the Democrats in this lame duck session, hey, Republicans are about to take it. We've got 60-some-odd judges we need confirmed quick before the Republicans get in. So we've got a month to do this. I know that's going to happen. He's already announced, or the White House already announced on election night. I mean, his election was halfway across the United States that he was going to start doing things like that. So that will be a challenge, and there's not much that Republicans can do to stop that. They will sue, as they have done, and at this point, the U.S. Supreme Court has handed, and this includes his justices Kagan and Sotomayor, has rebuked the White House 9 times. The White House has lost 9 cases on constitutional grounds, directly rebuking the White House and what they were doing. Well, that's great. We'll file some more lawsuits. It'll be 2 to 4 years before anything happens. So that's the next election, the next president's already in. So that's not going to do it. And the House and Senate can send him bills like crazy, but he can keep vetoing it. And as he said, he's going to do executive orders. He has a phone and a pen. So the next 2 years, if you think there was obstruction in the last 2 years, wait till you see the next 2 years. It will not be pretty. It will seem more partisan, and the conservatives will get the blame for it. They will certainly get the blame for being aggressive, for being extremists, for being out there, and the president's just having to do what he can to keep them from being too wild and too extreme, because that's the way those conservatives are. And so they will get the bad press for the next 2 years, but that's going to be part of the question, is what will they do? And so in talking to members of both the House and Senate, I've told them very plainly that now that you guys have majority, if you don't really become aggressive and really act aggressive, you won't get a shot in 2016. I mean,
That's right.
It's that simple. And they agree. Now whether they can get their leadership to do that, whether Leader McConnell will do that, whether Leader Boehner will do that, we'll see. We'll just see. But that's part of the difficulties that folks can expect. So don't think this is a panacea. I mean, what happened on Tuesday night was a very good victory, but what you just did was you just kicked the hornet's nest and made them really mad. And so now you're going to have to deal with all the hornets that are going to come buzzing out of there in so many directions, and hopefully that will so infuriate the American people they'll be ready to really make a conservative move in 2016, whatever that might be, both in House, Senate, and presidency, and say we've had enough of the debt, we've had enough of the agencies, we've had enough of the bureaucracy, we've had enough of the regulatory laws, we've had enough of all that. We want to go back to liberty. And that may be a good consequence, but only if we're prepared for that up front and can endure the next 2 years with what is likely to be some very, very ugly fights and some very unfriendly agenda being pushed down our throats from the executive branch.
This is going to be a critical time over the next couple of years for we the people to be very involved because of the types of fights that are going to take place and the process we talked about yesterday. A lot of this stuff that's going to happen, people are going to have to stay tuned in, and they're going to have to help spread the word and not let the media spin these battles over the next 2 years and control public opinion. We the people have got to stand up. We've got to take a quick break. We'll be right back here on WallBuilders Live. We're talking about election results today. It's Good News Friday.
This is David Barton with another moment from America's history. Shortly after the American Revolution, America had become the envy of the world. It still remains a wonder of the modern world as 219 years later, America has become the longest ongoing constitutional republic in the history of the world. What was the foundation upon which our founding fathers established this great nation? According to John Adams, the foundation was Christianity. John Adams declared, "The general principles on which the fathers achieved independence were the general principles of Christianity. Now I will avow that I then believed, and now believe, that those general principles of Christianity are as eternal and immutable as the existence and attributes of God." According to founding father John Adams, it was the principles of Christianity which formed the foundation for American government.
For more information on God's hand in American history, contact WallBuilders at 1-800-8-REBUILD.
Let the torch of freedom burn.
Welcome back to WallBuilders Live. It's Good News Friday. We're talking about the elections from this week and what to do next. Of course, the good news, David, is that a lot of great people got elected. Maybe the biggest thing most people are talking about this week is the Republicans taking over the Senate. How does that change the stopping of the Obama agenda and kind of the slide towards socialism we've been dealing with for years? Will having both chambers of Congress make any more of a difference than having just one?
Well, it will, but it won't be a fast difference. If you remember, after President Obama came to office, within the first year he had doubled the debt. He had taken it from approximately $5 trillion to about $10 trillion. The next year it went up to about $14 trillion, and it's up to about $17 now. But notice that it doubled the first year, went up by about 8 or about 7, and then it went up by about 4, and then it went up by about 2. And that's because even though Republicans only had the House, they quit spending. They didn't let them spend, and they had no Senate, and that's why you recall we went 3 years with no budget. Well, what the House did was they would not give him the money to keep spending us into more debt. So it's taken 3 years to get it back down, but we're at a point now where that 2 years ago we'd actually reached spending levels of when Bush left office. Now, they were too high when Bush left office, but considering where Obama had taken us in spending, the House by itself, without any help from the Senate, got it back down to where the spending levels were right where they had been when Bush left office, and that was that 6 to 8 trillion mark in debt. So they have the power of the purse. They can do that. They can. Well, let's say that the president does something with EPA and they run all these regs through. Well, the House can quickly pass a law that says we will not fund the implementation in those regs. But guess what? The president's not going to sign that. So what happens is you will have some kind of budget impasse where the House will refuse to spend. He will not sign the budget, and you'll have some more sequestering like we're having right now. Now, the victim of that will be the military, because in the sequestering, he specifically made the military the disproportionate recipient of the cuts. It was not every agency is going to have to cut 10%. It's like all you other agencies cut 10%, but military you cut 25%. I mean, it was a disproportionate cut. And those numbers are just examples, but it was a very disproportionate cut. So what they can do is they can refuse to appropriate money, which means we will continue in the downsizing aspect of the military. And all the military guys right now say this national security is now at jeopardy. It's not a matter of whether we can go over and handle ISIS. We're not sure we can defend our own borders at this point. So that'll be the downside of it. And I don't mean to sound negative with this, but this is where we are. And sometimes this is what it takes to get healthy. You know, sometimes you have to lance a boil to get the poison out of your body. And lancing a boil is not fun. And it doesn't feel good, but there's certain things you have to, you got cancer, you got to go through radiation chemo, and that's not easy and that's not fun, but you got to do that to get rid of the sickness that's so deeply embedded.
So despite the good news from Tuesday, we need to be realistic about the tough battles ahead.
Oh, yeah. And, by the way, if you're a person of faith, this should not discourage you at all. You need to remember what happened in the book of Joshua, right in Deuteronomy, in the early part of Joshua. They went in and one group came back and said, "Oh my gosh, we're as grasshoppers in their sight. They're giants. There's no way we can defeat them." And God got ticked off at those folks. The people like Joshua and Caleb said, "Oh my gosh, they're giants. We're as grasshoppers in their sights. This will make it really fun when we kick their tail." And that's the attitude you got to have. Is there's giants out there and there's some hard stuff coming, no question about it. That's all right. Let's kick its tail. And so if you get that offensive-minded mentality and don't get mopey and don't get self-pity and I wish it had been, look, if we'd been good, vigilant people for the last 25, 30 years, we might not be here, but we went to sleep. The parable out of Matthew 13:25, when the good people went to sleep, the enemy came in and sowed the tares. We've been too involved with soccer games and with too many things at church and whatever, and we didn't pay attention, and so we're paying a price for it now. But that's all right. This is stuff that can be whipped. And so this is not a discouraging thing. This is just a realistic thing. Just roll up your sleeves and say, we got work to do, but you know what? Let's get the sickness gone so that we can be a healthy nation in the future for our kids, and that's something worth working for.
Totally, absolutely. Got to take a quick break. We'll come back for more right here on WallBuilders Live.
Hey guys, this is Tim Barton with WallBuilders, and I know you hear my dad and Rick talk a lot about our founding fathers, about the original intent of our nation, the constitutional heritage that we have, and really we've seen how far we've slipped away from that. And I know a lot of us, as we hear my dad and Rick talk, think, I wish there was a place that I could go and I could see these documents, and I could read and learn about the founding fathers firsthand and see the things they did. And I want to give you some websites today that can help you accomplish that very thing. If you get online, you can go to places like Library of Congress, and you can look under their Century of Lawmaking or historical documents. You can go to the Avalon Project, to the Founders Constitution, to Google Books, or even the Internet Archives, or you can just go to WallBuilders' website. We have a section for our library, and under that section we have different subgroups for historical documents, historical writings, even a place where you can get helpful links to find out more information about other websites where you can do research for yourself and find the truth for yourself. Friends, this is a time that we need to know who we are and where we came from. WallBuilders.com is a great place to go.
Let the torch of freedom burn.
Welcome back to WallBuilders Live. Thanks for staying with us. It's Good News Friday, and this is the week of the election, so we've been talking about election results. And by the way, yesterday we covered a lot of the specific races. If you go to our website, wallbuilderslive.com, you can click on the archives and listen to yesterday's program as well. And David, one of them I just had to mention was here in Texas. You had an effort, Battleground Texas, for the left to try to take over Texas. and it was all about the governor's race. And man, 21 points our governor won by, defeating that battleground effort. So Greg Abbott pushed back that effort by the left to take Texas back.
Well, I'm going to disagree with you some on that. Abbott did win big, but battleground Texas was purportedly on the governor's race for Wendy Davis, but it really wasn't. They used her as an excuse to come in and get set up in the cities in a big way, to go after the cities and thus go after county races and local races and take the state back from within. So she was their purported excuse to raise the millions that did help Wendy Davis, but that's not where they spent it. They spent it down in those races. So we'll have to see what happens coming up in May with the city elections in San Antonio, with the city elections in Houston, where you have the openly homosexual mayor, the fight that's going there over the various ordinances. The same thing in San Antonio, where they've passed an ordinance that gives you a $500 a day fine if you criticize homosexuality. That's where they were trying to make their gains and solidify things and start winning congressional seats there in the future.
So a lot of stuff behind the scenes that they're building for.
That's right. So I'm not sure. We won't know how effective or ineffective they've been until we start seeing what happens at lower levels. But it was purportedly about Wendy Davis against Greg Abbott, and that's actually not right. So we have yet to see. By the way, there is a great DVD folks ought to watch called Rocky Mountain Heist, which shows how this is how Colorado lost its state. They came in purportedly at big races, but they were doing everything underground in smaller races, and that's where they took it over. That's how they flipped Iowa. That's how they flipped Colorado, etc. So it's very instructive for people to see, so you recognize it when it happens in your own state.
Well, and speaking of some of this stuff that kind of goes on, not necessarily behind the scenes, but certainly less attention is paid to, is a lot of these propositions that were on the ballot around the country. There were some of these things we didn't even know. I think most people didn't even know was occurring. We had one here in Texas, but there were several across the country. How did all that fare?
Well, there were 106 ballot initiatives in 42 states on election night, and we followed those. We particularly followed probably about 90 of those initiatives. Some were so local that we didn't follow them. But, for example, you had 4 initiatives on life, and those 4 initiatives on life, pro-life won in only 1 of the 4. So abortion won 3 out of the 4 pro-life initiatives. There was none on marriage per se. There was one that indirectly affected marriage. We lost it. There were several that dealt with other moral issues. Marijuana, lost all the marijuana ones except in Florida. And even though 57% supported marijuana in Florida, it takes 60% to pass an amendment in Florida. So they got 57%, not 60%. So across the board, strong support for marijuana. Oregon went to recreational use. Other states went to medical use. So there was that going on. There was a lot of stuff that wasn't very good on election night, Tuesday night, as far as social issues went. But there were a lot of really good things related to limiting government. And by the way, before I get to those good things, there were a couple of bad things that need to be pointed out. And hopefully we can help by saying we, I mean our listeners, can help address those around them to point out a couple of things. Particularly in states that already have a lot of taxes, they found a new way to pass taxes this time, and they got people to vote for more taxes on themselves, but they changed it and called it a bond election. And they said authorizing $50 million for the issuance of bonds and transportation. Well, when you issue bonds, you're issuing indebtedness, and you will pay off that indebtedness. Now, it's not by direct taxes right then. They'll raise your property taxes or your school taxes or your city taxes or something else. But anytime you see a bond election, you didn't know that you're voting for indebtedness. And so people thought, oh, bonds, well, that's great. We can give $50 million to the schools and we can give $50 million to highways. No, you just went in debt for $50 million. It's just a different way of paying it off. It's not direct taxes, it's indirect taxes, but you will pay for it. So we got creamed on bond elections. And that was a very smart move for states to say, we're going to tax our people, but we just won't call it taxes, we'll call it bonds. The other thing that was really disappointing was across the nation there were all sorts of efforts to impose business regulations on businesses, to tell businesses how to do their jobs. And those passed overwhelmingly. People said, yeah, let's tax business. Yeah, let's put a tax on let's tell businesses here's who they have to hire. Yeah, let's tell businesses here's what they have to pay. And businesses pay nothing and they hire nobody. It's people who pay everything. When you tax a business, you have just taxed yourself. That business doesn't pay taxes. It'll put it on its products and move it on out. So that's the other thing, is we really taxed ourselves by thinking we were putting it on businesses. That's not the way the free market system works. So those were the downsides of it. The upsides were you had states like Arkansas that said, we will not allow any rule to become a law in this state unless it's been voted on by the legislature. We'll have none of that. We had the people of Tennessee who said, you know what, our judges have been striking down our pro-life laws. We're stripping power from judges. We're not letting them do that. So there were a number of areas where we limited the government. We limited the size and the scope of government. There were a number of efforts to make appointed boards of education rather than elected boards of education. People beat those back. So there was a lot of good stuff on getting government back in the hands of the people and limiting the power and scope of government. But on economic issues, we really didn't do well. We put more debt on ourselves, and thinking we were going to make businesses pay taxes, we've ended up taxing ourselves through both bonds and through business. So that's the look at initiatives. That gives us something to work on over the next 2 years, but by and large, there were good things that happened in the initiatives, those 146 initiatives on Tuesday night.
And lots of good things in the elections themselves. There's a lot of positives going to come out of this, folks, but it's going to take continued work on our part, we the people, holding those folks accountable that we just elected on Tuesday night. You've been listening to WallBuilders Live. It's been Good News Friday. Get more of our programs right there at wallbuilderslive.com.
We stand under